Have you ever stepped away from a conversation convinced you had expressed every single thought clearly, yet the uneasy feeling in your stomach told you that somehow you still came out second best? Have you felt that tight knot at the base of your throat growing each time another sentence left your mouth, as though every extra word dragged you farther from your own center of gravity? Maybe you move through rooms where certain voices boom over everyone else, where interruptions are normal, where mockery passes for confidence, and where arrogance wears the mask of certainty. Deep down, you might have accepted the idea that staying quiet equals weakness, that choosing not to defend yourself is the same as surrender, that refusing to react means handing the win to the other side. What if that entire story is backwards? What if real power has never been hidden in spoken lines at all, but in the spaces where words are missing? Nietzsche, arguably one of the most misread thinkers in all philosophy, caught sight of a truth most of us still dodge. People who talk endlessly expose themselves endlessly, and anyone desperate to convince is already climbing a steep hill. The culture around us keeps repeating that we must battle for every idea, justify every stance, and pour explanations into every skeptical ear as though every chat were a fight for ultimate truth. Nietzsche suggested another path, quieter, sharper, and far more intelligent. He believed silence is not an empty gap, it is a solid presence. Silence unsettles. Silence knocks people off balance. Silence forces whoever stands across from you to meet themselves with no outside noise to hide behind. If you are someone who leaves gatherings feeling ignored, overshadowed, or flat out invisible, if you keep walking home thinking no one really registered what you tried to communicate, this message is aimed directly at you. If you are tired of wearing the label of the nice one, the peacekeeper people exploit because you refuse to raise your voice, know this: maybe you have mistaken your quiet for submission, yet today you will see that quiet can be your sharpest blade, and that true victory does not arrive through winning an argument, but through never needing to enter one. Get ready to look at silence with new eyes, not as the absence of a reply, but as the ultimate reply. Let's lean into Nietzsche's view and learn how to handle any setting without uttering a single syllable. Why do we cling so fiercely to the urge to answer back, to correct, to prove that we are right? At the deepest layer, we have been trained to believe truth must be shielded with tooth and nail, that if we keep still, we let the other side win. Nietzsche read that reflex as a signal of weakness. Beneath the fear of looking weak lives the ego, thin-skinned, unable to handle being questioned, quick to translate disagreement into personal attack, eager to turn a casual chat into a full-blown battlefield. He pointed out that during most disputes, people are not hunting honesty, they are hunting power. They argue to prop up beliefs that feel shaky, because if those beliefs wobble, their whole world might collapse. In that frame, argument is not a path to wisdom, it is armor. The ego's loud cry for control over the story being told. Recognize what that means. The moment you feel pushed to justify yourself, to defend your corner, you have already stepped into their arena, and by their rules, you are down a point. The urge to explain shows you are still chasing acceptance, validation, understanding. Nietzsche labeled this habit herd morality, the tendency to live according to the crowd's expectations, longing to be stamped as good, correct, fair. That hunger for applause is precisely what holds you small. Real strength, he insisted, is not in converting others to your view, but in no longer needing their agreement. Strength is standing by your vision, while laughter, criticism, or rejection swirl around you. It is remaining solid even when misunderstood. He outlined a form of power measured not in debate victories but in self-mastery, a power that grows from staying calm while every other face at the table reddens. It expands the second you stop reacting. Remember this: conversation is theater, and the first actor to leap on stage has already surrendered the higher ground. A reactive mind is a mind in chains. An observing mind is the threat because it sits above the need to prove anything. Think for a second about the last time somebody cut you off mid-sentence. Your heartbeat probably spiked, your cheeks warmed, and an itch rose to jump back in, to grab back the air that had been stolen. That rush inside is proof of how tightly we have been wired to respond. From our school days, we are praised for having answers ready, for raising a hand, for participating, and that applause trains us to believe speech equals value. Yet the flip side of that lesson is rarely taught. Constant talking bleeds power. Silence, by contrast, is not simply lack of noise, it is a mirror. When the mirror goes up, others cannot dodge their own reflection. They hurry to fill the gap, piling sentence upon sentence, and in that hurry they hand over their patterns, biases, and insecurities like open cards on a table. You learn everything while risking nothing. That is why, when Nietzsche writes about power, he keeps steering the reader inward. Power begins with discipline over the self, over the impulse to blurt, to brag, to chase applause. Anyone can raise a voice, only a few can hold their breath long enough to let the storm pass and still be standing. Picture a heated debate where two sides fire facts, jokes, and jabs. The crowd cheers, tempo rises. Then, at the center, you remain motionless, eyes clear, pulse steady. Your posture alone says, "I do not need this contest." The tension shifts. Suddenly, the noise feels less like confidence and more like desperation. It dawns on the spectators that the calm figure might already possess what everyone else is begging for, certainty that does not depend on echo or agreement. If adopting that posture feels impossible, remember it is a skill, not a personality trait. It begins with a simple decision to delay your first reply by one heartbeat, to watch the dialogue like a distant landscape, and to wait until speaking truly serves purpose rather than ego. One heartbeat becomes two, then three, and each added beat thickens the presence of someone who decides instead of reacts. But if reacting is off the table, how do you project power? If words betray us, how do you let people feel your weight without releasing a single phrase? Nietzsche's answer is the Übermensch, the individual who rises above ordinary rules and shapes reality through absolute command of the self. In the next section, we will break down that figure and see how it turns silence into an instrument of dominance. From this point on, silence starts to speak for you. If what you are hearing so far makes sense, tap the subscribe button and stick around. I appreciate the support. Nietzsche never wrote for the timid. His pages are carved for the few willing to stare inward, confront their own fragility, and forge that fragility into force. The typical person is entangled in traditions, moral codes, and the need for clapping crowds. But there is another category, scarce, formidable, unbound. The Übermensch, often translated as the overman, does not drift through life reacting to it. He molds life to match his design. And, most strikingly, he often accomplishes that molding in near total silence. The Übermensch does not chase trophies from debates. He refuses cheap emotional sparring. He watches, he studies. He decides, with care, when to let words loose and, more crucially, when to stay wordless. He has grasped what most overlook. Silence itself is a language, one that never begs for agreement. It simply imposes presence. The silence of the Übermensch is never a void. It is a warning, a form of authority, the audible echo of hard-won self-command. While others raise their voices, he secures respect with a single steady gaze. While others over-explain, he surveys the scene and through his stillness exposes their weak spots. His quiet becomes an unseen wall. Those standing opposite scramble, guessing what hides behind it, and in their scramble they misstep, overshare, and stumble out of rhythm. Do not confuse this quiet with passivity. It is absolute management of personal energy. It is strategy. The Übermensch knows every sentence spoken is a chess move revealed too early. Every burst of emotion highlights a soft point. That knowledge is why he remains hushed, not because no thoughts swirl inside, but because he no longer needs to let them spill out. He has moved past any urge to show the world he is right. His very presence does the talking. And that silent weight unsettles everyone around him because it forces them to deal with their own inner noise. In an age where every corner buzzes with chatter and alerts, the people who can command silence sit on the real thrones. Nietzsche pictured the Übermensch as the one who writes his own code of values, his own rules, his own moral compass. He does not lean on outside approval. And that is why others feel the ground shift, because nothing rattles a crowd more than someone who cannot be pushed around with guilt, fear, or the craving for praise. His quiet works like armor against all those tricks, and when he finally opens his mouth, it is only because his words are about to shake empires. That thought raises a larger issue. What is it about silence that makes folks uneasy? Why do many people tense up the moment someone decides not to answer back? What fires off inside the mind when the clash everyone expects is replaced by an unexpected void? Psychology holds the key, and diving into it shows how deep the effect runs. Silence is never just blank space, it is a clean mirror, and what it throws back can be hard to face. When you withhold a reply, you are not simply muting yourself, you are compelling the other person to sit with their own voice, to weigh their own arguments without the comfort of a push and pull. That alone shakes people because most do not speak to share, they speak to shield, to reassure themselves, to plug the gap between the picture they present and the person they fear they might be. The moment you go quiet, the costume slips. Studies in social psychology reveal that, in confrontations, people often read silence as judgment. It doesn't matter if you are honestly just listening. The speaker starts to feel naked. With no verbal cue from you, they lose the steering wheel over how the story is framed. The brain snaps into alert mode as the amygdala, the alarm bell for fear and anxiety, lights up. At once they begin to project their own worries. Is he judging me? Did she spot my bluff? Does he see the crack in my... Inside this mental arena, silence becomes an invisible blade, slicing through armor no one else can see, yet everyone can sense. Nietzsche grasped this long before labs placed sensors on subjects. To him, most people live as prisoners of their knee-jerk responses, blurting from vanity, reacting from the fear of being forgotten. The stronger spirit holds steady because each spoken line is a pawn surrendered to the enemy. Each emotional flare a shout that shows where to strike. The effect is even harsher on manipulators. People who live off steering others' feelings rely on reactions to stay in control. When you give them none, their game board flips. They flounder, searching for cues, and in that scramble expose the weak spots they meant to hide. Yet silence cuts deeper still. It stirs buried wounds. It pokes at memories of rejection, abandonment, and humiliation. Suddenly, the person across from you sees they are not at the center, that their words alone cannot sway the room, that their mere presence does not hold the same weight on you that it holds on them. For a swollen ego, that is unbearable. So when you keep quiet, you are not merely protecting yourself, you are striking right where ego is most brittle, at the heart of the illusion of importance. Silence demands courage because it is uncomfortable not only for others, but for you. It goes against everything drilled into us: speak up, defend, explain. The habit to react is wired so deeply it feels like a reflex. That is why silence, when chosen, radiates real power. It takes discipline, and discipline is strength. Now that you see how quiet digs into the mind of the other, stirring uncertainty, dissolving defenses, exposing masks, it is time to advance from observer to strategist. Next comes using that force on purpose. Knowledge without action is lifeless, so let's turn silence into an active tool, a scalpel rather than a shield. Step 1 is simple but ruthless. Stay quiet exactly when every nerve begs you to reply. That takes muscle inside because each fiber will itch to defend, justify, prove you are correct. Yet that itch is toxic. Whenever you scratch it, you reveal that their opinion still governs you, that you are still tangled in their game. Genuine silence is born only after you have suffocated that need. Once you grasp that truth stands on its own and does not require a microphone to exist. The second edge of silence is observation. While others drown in explanations and toss filler lines to occupy space, you listen, but not like someone lining up a counterpunch. You listen the way a tracker listens to twigs snap in the woods. You notice fears tucked between pauses, the slight mismatch that betrays a contradiction, the tremor that arrogance tries to hide. You store it all because if and when you do speak, it will be pinpoint accurate, delivered with the exactness of someone who has mapped the other person's emotional terrain. The third blade is time. Grow comfortable letting the quiet. A pause breeds tension, and tension equals leverage. While the other side speaks and waits for your reaction, still nothing, something inside them buckles. The longer the gap, the stronger the discomfort. Their mind rushes to fill that space with guesses, worries, and worst-case stories. One steady look paired with silence can carry more force than a string of polished sentences. The fourth weapon is unpredictability. Once you master the previous three, you become unreadable, and the unreadable is always respected, often feared. People realize they cannot chart your next move, so they tread lighter, measure each word, double-check each claim. In that instant, you flip the script. You are no longer responding to their gravity, they orbit yours. Silence stops being the absence of talk and turns into raw control, an unseen field that bends the whole dialogue around you. Yet a final warning remains crucial. But be careful, do not confuse silence with passivity. Nietzsche never defended softness or retreat. When he wrote about staying quiet, he meant a silence that crackles with force. Picture a drawn bow. The string is still, but every strand pulls tight with stored energy. That is the quality of quiet we are dealing with. You are not holding back because you are nervous or shy. You are holding back because you are choosing your ground, lining up your shot, and steadying your breath. The power is already obvious to everyone in the room, even if you have not spoken a syllable. And when the perfect instant arrives, after your stillness has already carried its full message, you let out one line, maybe two. A single clear thought, sharp as a needle, leaves your lips and ends the whole discussion. It does not win because it is louder. It wins because it is precise, because it slices to the center of the matter where nothing can hide, because it sounds truer than anything thrown across the table before. Yet, there is another side to this story. Up to now, we have spoken of using silence to outmaneuver opponents, but some moments are about something even more basic than winning an argument. They are about keeping your emotional self alive in places where people are draining you. You know these scenes. The coworker who never stops shifting blame, the relative who twists every talk into a guilt trip, the partner who uses your calm nature like a cushion for their own chaos. Day by day, you hand over pieces of control without even noticing, and they do not need to raise their voices to dominate. This is the darkest edge of the journey. The point where silence is no longer a tactic, but a muffled cry from someone whose grip on their own life is slipping. We need to call this out, because while you believe you are avoiding needless fights, someone else may be laying bricks for a fortress built on your quiet. Nietzsche sniffed out this trap long ago. Ask yourself, is there anything crueler than having your voice stolen? Yes, being trained to believe that staying voiceless is your only respectable. Society often tells you that swallowing heat, backing away from dispute, and smoothing every rough edge marks real maturity. The lesson sounds gentle, but what if it is nothing more than a collar? What if that brand of quiet is disguised surrender? Nietzsche saw straight through the mask. What many call peace is simply a tamed spirit accepting the leash. Notice how certain people spot your willingness to overlook small slights and turn it into a weapon. They nudge their opinions forward, stake their flags in spaces that once belonged to you, and you let it slide because you have convinced yourself the problem is too small to mention. You tell yourself harmony is worth the cost, but the fee you pay, though invisible at first, is huge. Self-respect drains drip by drip. Worse, the ones who profit from your calmness know full well you will not resist, and they plan around. Nietzsche wrote about what he called slave morality, a system of values shaped by the weaker side simply to survive in a world led by stronger wills. In that system, being meek, feeling guilty, and pleasing others becomes a mark of supposed goodness. It is an invisible rulebook that asks you to shrink, to mute your wants, and then pat yourself on the back for doing so. Nietzsche never set his pen to paper for people who accept that program. He wrote for anyone ready to shatter the invisible chains, anyone willing to spot how they are being used, and finally refuse to cooperate in their own quiet defeat. Every time you accept forced silence, the type that turns inward and eats at your guts, you hand away power. Bit by bit, you become a shape carved by outside demands. You stop living as yourself and start serving as whatever role others require at the moment. That condition stands light years away from what Nietzsche called the will to power. Real will to power does not mean barking louder than everyone else. It means steering your own life from the inside. It means wrapping both hands around your personal story and writing it yourself. It means choosing silence, not from fear, but from the knowledge that you owe no explanations. The silence of submission must die so that another silence can be born, the silence of presence. This second silence does not bend, does not crawl, does not say sorry for taking up space. It rises and, without yelling, changes the direction of everything around it. Nietzsche would respect only this flavor of quiet, the kind carried by a person who rules themselves first. But how do you get there? How do you step away from letting people play you like a puppet and stand instead as the one who shapes the tone of any exchange? How do you rip out the herd morality stitched into your habits and re-emerge as someone whose wordless presence sets the rhythm for everyone else? The doorway sits inside the most famous symbol in Nietzsche's writing, the Übermensch. We have touched on this figure already. Now we dig into becoming one. The world is sick of endless chatter from mouths that run faster than minds. It needs more people who command silence and lead through it. Here is the turning point. Silence is not the hole between sentences. Real silence is concentrated being. It is the marker that you have stopped dancing to every note the outside world plays and started arranging the soundtrack yourself. Nietzsche's essays were never meant for people satisfied with basic survival. He aimed at those who crave to transcend past versions of themselves, those ready to tear off the comfortable masks handed out at birth, even if ripping hurts. The silence of the Übermensch is nothing like the silence forced on the oppressed, nor the hush worn by the fearful. It is the quiet of a fighter who has already secured victory before swords clash. It is the deep calm of one who no longer needs applause, who already knows his worth down to the bone. So scan your own time. How many scenes come to mind where you kept quiet out of worry, out of guilt, out of dread that you might rock the boat? How many moments did you let others direct the script, speak over your view, or flatten your truth while you nodded along? That is enough. Nietzsche would label that pattern an insult to the gift of being alive. To live bowed under such silence is to commit slow betrayal against your own essence. From this hour forward, your quiet must shift tone. It cannot stay an escape hatch. It has to evolve into an unspoken declaration that forms a clear border. Even if no one else in the room grasps it, you will know it is there. Who you are does not need broad understanding. It needs lived expression, and that takes daring. If you can summon that daring, drop a brief line below. I choose the silence that commands respect. Post it not just to show you reach this part of the lesson, but to carve your decision in public space. Words still carry force, even when they speak about staying silent. Do not stop here. The upcoming video will stretch these ideas further, pushing your mindset beyond today's limit. Watch it because you deserve to grow, not because I tell you to. And keep one simple comparison burned in mind. The weak shout, the strong remain silent, the wise choose when. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.